Hi there, welcome to this week's Record Rangers podcast. I'm Douglas Dickie, here to give a fan's eye view. I'm joined by my erstwhile colleagues, Scott McDermott and Andy Newport. Not too much happening at Ibrox this week to discuss, guys. Another quiet week. So we go again. I think this is our third search for a manager this season. So not a massive surprise. I don't think. I think the mood music had kind of changed around Ibrox midweek, especially after the Sturm Graz game. So, just Russell Martin obviously gone, and I think relief among the Rangers support, a bit of anger towards those who appointed him in the first place. What are your guys' thoughts? The right decision made eventually?
I don't know if me and Andy's got another manager search in us, Douglas, to be honest.
I don't know if the Rangers support does, Scott.
I can't believe we're in this position again. Look, ultimately, I think this has been brewing for a while. Obviously, I think most of us thought it would have been done before now. Results and performances have been nowhere near good enough, both domestically and in Europe. But it did feel like the weekend, even before the Falkirk game, to me anyway, it felt like that was pivotal. After the Sturm Graz game, and even after Livingston, needing a last minute winner to beat Livy, getting up against another newly promoted team away from home, I certainly felt going into the game that if Rangers dropped any more points, that would be it for Russell Martin. And that's not even mentioning the kind of the fan fury surrounding him in terms of the kind of hardcore support, making it pretty clear they wanted him and others out. So the way the game went on Sunday, me and Andy were there, it felt like at full time, it definitely felt as if the writing was on the wall. I think you're right. I think the mood did change after Sturm Graz. I think crucially, those videos that appeared of fans kind of confronting Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart in the team hotel, I do think that would have had an impact on the decision making. But ultimately, I think it has to be the right decision. I mean, look, Rangers are sitting at 8th in the Premiership, where they 9 points behind Celtic, 11 behind Hearts. Already lost their opening 2 Europa League games. The recruitment's seriously getting called into question when you look at the performances and the standards that these players are setting at the minute. So I must admit, I don't know if Andy feels the same. I feel for Russell Martin just on a personal level, because I think he's a decent guy. I think he's an honest guy. The kind of limited dealings I had with him both in press conferences and away from that, I always found him really good to deal with. But I felt this when he got appointed, that he just wasn't, maybe wasn't the type of character, the type of manager that Rangers needed. We all know this club demands a certain type of personality, and it just didn't feel like the right fit, and that's the way it's gone. So I think the decision had to be made. It's only 122 days. It is hard to believe we're back in this position again. And for me, the big question now is that there should be real scrutiny on the people who appointed Russell Martin, and real question marks over whether you would trust them to get the right guy next time.
I think so. I was just going to say, from my point of view, I think the thing that will gall the Rangers supporters most was that all the things that they pointed to of why this appointment has failed, they were saying that from day dot. Russell Martin had to come in his first day in the job at his unveiling press conference and answer to the fact that the fans weren't having him from day one. And so the fact is that they made clear, they pointed out to the board, they pointed out to Kevin Thelwell, to Patrick Stewart, that they didn't believe he was a candidate that deserved a job of this stature. I remember sitting in Hotline Live back in the summer saying this was a guy who, and I agree with Scott, I did find him on a personal level really good to deal with. He would answer your questions. Yeah, he would get. There was a couple of occasions he got a wee bit short with some questions, but I think that was just a sign of the strain he was under. I think generally speaking, he was very good from our point of view in the media to deal with. But I think, I remember saying, he's a manager who wins as many games as he loses, and that has basically been his record at Rangers. 5 wins in 17 games. I think there's 6 draws in there as well, 7 draws in there, something like that. So, I didn't see from a football point of view that he had the pedigree that was deserving of this kind of job. But the board, in their wisdom, decided to press ahead, decided to go with them. They wanted to implement a style of football. They wanted to take it down a radical path, a radically different path from what they'd been trying before, what the previous regimes had tried before. For me, it was too much too soon. They didn't have the players. They didn't have the culture at the club in terms of this is how we play football. They've tried to knock it out of the park. A bit like the previous board did with Pedro Caixinha. They've taken a swing at something, hoping to go totally in the opposite direction of where the club is at right now. And I think what you saw previously when Steven Gerrard got the job is that these things take time. You have to build. You have to gradually put the foundations in place and build on top of that. And I think that's what they'll have to do now. If they're going to bring in somebody in, I don't think they can bring in another, Pep Guardiola type that's going to try and a radical possession-based game plan, because they simply don't have the players there to do it. It's one thing, Russell Martin was adamant it wasn't the tactics, it was down to mentality. But if you've not got the mentality in the squad to deal with the tactics, then it is about the tactics. And this is where Russell Martin fell down. I think you saw latterly towards, let's say latterly, it was only, 122 days, Scott says. You saw late on in his short-lived reign that there was times where he was basically just throwing out his principles, throwing mud at a wall and hoping something would stick. And it didn't. This is why Rangers manager of all time, arguably, well, I think he is. I think he goes down now as the worst manager in the club's history. As I say, nobody wants to say that, but I think the stats, the figures, was it 1 win out of 7 in the league, a record equaling Champions League defeat, 2 defeats in the Europa League. As I say, no other manager has been in and out the job as quickly as he is. I can't see how you can paint it as anything other than that. So I agree entirely with Scott that it now falls, a lot of scrutiny now falls on Patrick Stewart, on Kevin Thelwell, and even on the American Honours, because as much as they have been trusted, the 2 executives, to run the day-to-day run of the club, it was made clear to them by the supporters a month ago, maybe longer than that this wasn't working, and they decided to stick with them, and it's cost them, and it's costing them, and it's, they're probably looking now 9 points behind Celtic, 11 behind Hearts. I think it's fair to say they're out of the title race, unless something remarkable happens, unless the new manager can come in and get a huge turnaround. But the number of points Rangers have dropped already isn't far off what you would be looking at to drop the entire season, and they've done it inside the first 6 weeks of the season. So I think the scrutiny now falls on those above Russell Martin, or who were above Russell Martin, and they now need to come out and answer the fans what they saw in Russell Martin that the rest of us didn't see, that the rest of the supporters didn't see, and explain how they're going to avoid making the same mistakes next time.
I think, Andy, I think you made a couple of points here that I'll go back on. The first is, from a fan's eye view, you guys are talking as people who've dealt with Russell Martin, who deal with him on a kind of daily basis. So I'm going to take your word for it, that, he's been a decent guy to kind of deal with. The impression among the support, I think, is of a guy who probably woke up this morning and still thinks everyone else is wrong and I'm right. That, that's the kind of image he kind of projected in his press conferences. And I think that also riled up the supporters.
Douglas, you're right, but I think to expect a guy to go into a dressing room, to go into management and not have a certain level of ego about them, to be able to stand in front of a group of men and say, I want to be a leader, I think you need a certain level of ego of that. You need to be a strong character. You need to have, dare I say, a wee bit of arrogance, certainly a lot of self-belief that you're the man to do it. So I can't really fault him for that. Yeah, there was slight mannerisms that have rubbed up people the wrong way, but I think that just comes down to circumstances. I think if he's winning games, people don't mention that. They don't mention the fact he's not wearing a suit. They don't mention his hair. I wrote a column this morning saying if he delivered silverware, there'd have been queue the length of Bass Street with people going into Taylor Ferguson to get the curtains done, get the copycat curtains done. It's the fact that he was losing games, and that's the sort of thing that we picked up on. I think that we really, we've seen managers come under pressure and face a bit of abuse before, face a bit of flack. I think what was so different this time is just how quickly it get personal. And I think that comes down to, again, that the fans weren't having them from the start. It comes down to the general mood amongst the supporters. The fact that this summer was supposed to be the great big reset, the takeover. They've got money to spend. This was going to be the year of Rangers' rebirth in terms of a title-winning sense, and it hasn't happened. And I think a lot of fans are just at their wits' end, and it's sort of boiled over. And unfortunately, it's got a wee bit toxic at times.
Douglas, I agree with you in the sense that, although I'm saying he's a good guy to deal with, and he has been from our point of view, but where I agree with you is I don't think he's helped himself, Russell Martin, at times with some of the things he's done and said. And look, maybe his ego is such that he won't look back and regret. But I'm pretty sure in the cold light of day, when he reflects on everything and he does look back, and that might be weeks, months, years down the line, he probably will look back and think he could have done things a little bit differently, and certainly said things a little bit differently. I think he knew he was up against it with the supporters right for the off, but then I don't really think he did enough to try and ingratiate himself with them or try and win them over from the off. And certainly when they turned against him, I just think there was certain kind of routes that he could have went down in press conferences and certain things that he could have said that would have maybe not got them fully back on side, but would have placated them slightly and appeased them slightly. But it was almost like a runaway train then by that stage. But as I say, I think when he looks back, I understand why fans would look and think it's arrogance. Honestly, I spoke to Rangers fans myself, and it felt, even though we probably didn't feel it in the media, I think when you're a supporter going every week, it felt at times some of the things he did and said it was like he was trolling the Rangers fans at times. So I understand that, and I think, as I say, he'll probably look back on that further down the line and think he could have done things differently.
It's funny, Andy, it was just, I was laughing when you spoke about everyone getting his haircut. I actually said on the bus back to Livingston, when we were going back to Livingston, I said, if we turn this round, I'll be bringing back my 90s style curtains, I think. I've already got the beard to go with it. So, yeah, I mean, purely, from a footballing point of view as well, he was obviously brought in to kind of change, become this possession-based team that were supposed to attack at pace. The possession certainly, on the whole, has turned out, but it's been possession for possession's sake. His set-up defensively has been really poor. His teams before, Southampton, Swansea, Milton Keynes, they all scored a lot of goals, but they had defensive frailties. Rangers had to endure the defensive frailties with none of the attacking kind of positives from that. I thought his set-up against Sturm Graz was not entirely responsible, but fundamentally responsible for the 2 goals we lost. I can't believe that John Souttar's decided to mark the corner flag without his manager's instructions from a throw-in, and that kind of high line from the free kick. That is his setup. And I know players ultimately lose you games, players get you the sack, but his setup's been so poor. And the only time we've looked dangerous this season, we've looked all right, is when panic sets in and there's a bit of chaos. And I say it on this show a lot. Scottish football is 90%, taking advantage of turnovers, taking advantage of those moments of chaos. And the issue the new manager's got, or whoever the new manager may be, and I'm sure we're going to discuss that in a minute, they're going to come into a squad, and this is where maybe Russell Martin does deserve a bit of sympathy. Recruitment's also been a shambles. I don't know if the squad's been set up to play the way he was supposed to want to play. I mean, we've got guys like, Antman, who just hugs that kind of touchline. I can't imagine that's fits in with his, Russell Martin's way of playing football. But, the new guy's going to need to come in and I don't think he can possibly, the owners have set out that we want Rangers to play a certain way, but they're going to need to bring in a guy who's going to need to play a completely different way from that, at least initially. They're going to need to consolidate, they're going to need to start winning games, whatever way that is, and then once the club's on a bit more of a level footing, then you can look to change the culture. But then you're looking at a manager who's kind of flexible. You're looking at a manager right now who's out of work, probably, because no one's going to do business at the start of October. It was the right decision for Russell Martin, but it feels like it's 122 days too late, because who's, for a start, who's going to want to come into this mess? It's just a complete omni shambles.
Well, just what you're saying about the style of play, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think for me, I think me and Scott spoke about this enough time in my travels this season, going, it looks like they take all their risk at the back and no risk up front. And for me, that's just the exact opposite of the way football should be played. You should be safe and secure at the back, get the ball up to your front men and let them do it. I mean, I don't know how many times you sit and you watch, whether it be Majowski, even Chermiti, Dessers before he left, Danilo before he got bombed out the team, just constantly making runs and the ball never comes their way. And it's because I don't know if it's this thought of we need to probe, we need to find the spaces. The spaces are there, they just never seem to pick up on them. The style of play has been too slow, too lethargic. I think there has been flashes, and I mean very, very brief flashes, where you saw kind of what he was trying to achieve. I think to the chance that Majowski misses at Livingston a couple of weeks back, where there was this sudden burst of one-touch play, in and out, and then suddenly the ball's played through the middle of the Livy defence, and Majowski's in, obviously sticks it over the bar. But at that point, I'm thinking, oh, that's how it's supposed to look. It was never ever lasting, and it was never ever played at a quick enough tempo that would allow that to work. I think that's where the frustration of fans come in. I mean, I think just culturally at Ibrox is at its loudest, its best when Rangers are getting at teams when they're playing at a fast tempo. But so often it was just plodding. It was again along the back line, gets to one side, back out to the other side, but without ever going into midfield, without ever going up into the front men. And even there was a moment yesterday at the game, I think it was Cornelius gets down to the left-hand side, and me and Scott are going, right, he's going to cross this into the box for Chermiti, and he comes back out at Gisama and it breaks down. It's like, I went to watch the team train before one of the European games, the sort of 15 minutes that the media get to go and watch training, and they did a drill that was basically all about that. Full back of the winger gets to the byline, they don't cross it in, bring it out and cut it back to somebody who's sitting deeper where they can cross the ball. I don't know, I've grown up watching wingers get the byline and put the balls into the box. That for me is how your best chance of getting a goal, if you're talking about from crosses.
And what's ironic about that?
Your striker's made a run into the box. Now you're bringing it out. Now he's having to reset. For me, it was just all muddled. I didn't get what he was trying to achieve, and I don't think he had the players to play the kind of way that he wanted. And you're saying, what does the next guy come in? I do think there are players that he can work with. You're talking about Atman, for example. This guy isn't a bad player. He got 15 assists last year in the Dutch Eredivisie. He's a decent player, but I think what you've seen, and I can only imagine it's because this is instructions he's been playing in, because we've seen Mikey Moore do the same thing. Every time he gets the ball wide right, he drives inside instead of going down the line. And I can only imagine that is because that is the tactic Russell Martin wants. He wants an extra body to come into midfield and play through the channels. I just think whoever comes in needs to say he likes Hartman, just play your natural game, get down the outside and put crosses in. Strikers are crying out for deliveries and they've had none of it yet. So, I don't know, what you feel?
All right, listen, the football's been dire. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. I mean, it's been absolutely turgid to watch. I actually said after, I think it was the Genk home game, I thought it was some of the worst football I'd ever seen for a Rangers team in terms of the tempo, in terms of the quality. I agree with you, Andy. There's been wee tiny flashes, but as well as obviously Russell Martin taking the brunt of the responsibility for that, I think it does come down a bit to recruitment as well, because and the quality's just not been there. Now you could argue that's to do with belief and confidence and results going against them. Maybe a new manager will come in and suddenly these players will get a lift and start showing their true quality, but I'm worried about the recruitment and the quality of these players that have been brought in for big sums of money. We talk about wee flashes. There was a moment in the game on Sunday, I don't know if you remember, it was in the first half. And again, it's what Russell Martin wanted to do. It was short passes at the back, drawing Falkirk in. You're a bit worried they were going to lose it. And then bang, 2 or 3 passes, they get out, and Rothwell get out with acres of space. And it was a 4v3 situation. I says to you in the press box, Andy, they need to score for this. It's 4v3. This is exactly what they've been looking for. He passed it to Mikey Moore, who produced a powder puff cross into the bottom. I mean, it was terrible. You're just thinking, I mean, what chance? And again, of course, the manager's got to take responsibility, but he must have been pulling his hair out at that stage thinking, finally, we actually do something that we've worked on. We beat Falkirk's press, we get out, we've got a 4v3 situation, and the quality is so poor. So, no, the football's been dire, and I agree. For a new manager, I don't know what Douglas thinks, but for whoever the new guy is, I mean, they need to get back to basics quickly with Rangers. They need to play these players in the right positions, get them into a system and a strategy where they can play their natural game, a bit like Andy's saying about Antman, for instance. It's back to basics time. It's get balls into the box. It's attacking football. It's playing with urgency, playing with a tempo, playing with speed, especially at Ibrox. They're miles away for that just now. And it's difficult to know in terms of a new guy coming in. Is it a bad time to come in? Is Douglas touched on somebody coming into this kind of shambolic situation? Or could you argue it's the perfect time to come in because Rangers are 8th in the league? I mean, they can't get any worse, basically. Surely the only way is up. So a manager worth his salt, you would think, would look at the league, look at Celtic and certainly shouldn't be frightened by kind of how they're performing at the minute. Even Brendan Rodgers himself said at the weekend they're miles off their best. Hearts are obviously flying high at the top, but again, any decent manager coming in would think he could claw back some of that points gap. So it might be an ideal time for somebody coming in because you say, I mean, it can't get any worse. And you would think, although what we're seeing with these, with this team, it doesn't look good. It feels like a kind of lost cause. They can't all be bad players. I mean, these guys can't all be bad. Worth more than they're showing.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, I don't know how you both feel, but where are the bright spots in the squad? I mean, for me, you're looking at Gassama. I think your typical winger, he can be sort of hot and cold, but you look at his performance the other night against Sturm Graz, I thought he was the only guy in the squad that looked to have any sort of knack, any sort of heart, any sort of determination to get at them and drag the team back in. Also gets the goal, sets up Chermity in the first half to hit the bar. But I mean, where else are you looking in that squad that gives you hope? Right, okay, there is something to work with, Douglas.
I think the most important thing to give us hope, first of all, is stop putting square pegs in round holes. We've bought Chermity. Right? You bring up Chermity now. I actually don't. I was kind of critical of the fee we paid for him, and he certainly doesn't look like an £8 million player. But I think he looks quite handy at times. But I think he looks handy with Gassama, as you said earlier, Andy. Get the byline, hang that ball up to the back post, which is very un-Russell Martin football. But we seem to have bought a player who looks pretty dangerous in the air. I think a guy who could, if we get him attacking the ball in the box, I think it could cause a bit of damage. So I think Gassama and Chermity right now, out with that, I'm really, really struggling. Mikey Moore's, not looked like the boy wonder. We were kind of sold.
See, pace for me, Douglas. I thought he's tricky, but he lacks pace. I thought yesterday.
What about Cornelius, Douglas? Do you like Cornelius?
I think he's looked okay. I actually think he looks better at left back than he does at centre half. I think he looks handy at left back, almost Sasa Papic-esque, I was
going to say, I agree. I actually think the back four on Saturday and Sunday it's probably their strongest back four. I think if a manager coming in is looking at them defensively, I know people have questioned Giga, and that's fine. He's not been great this season, but I think I think Tavernier, Suter, Giga, and Cornelius at left back's probably your best back four, and it gives you something to work with. And I agree with Cornelius. I'm not saying he's brilliant, but I think Rangers probably look a wee bit more secure with him there.
He's 28-year-old, 33 caps, played in France. You know, he's got experience of playing in front of big crowds. He's got experience of playing in a place that's intense, and that's what you need, isn't it, Scott?
And it was a great pass for the goal as well, of course.
I was going to say, he showed at the weekend when he gets into an attacking area, he's not like a centre back that's not technically good enough to produce a cross. So, but I think he's been okay. I agree. Gassama's been the shining light. Huge question marks over Asgard for me. I mean, Andy will be fed up with me going on about him, but it's like, listen, he's a young player. You don't want to be too harsh or too critical, but I mean, for me, he's done absolutely nothing in a Rangers jersey. For a number 10, for an attacking midfielder, I mean, I was speaking to people before he arrived at Rangers who were raving about him down south and raving about his potential, saying this boy will score, this boy could score 20, 25 goals in the Scottish League. I don't think I've seen him ever a shot on target yet.
No.
I mean, it's been so bad. And no, we all accept that it takes players time to settle into a new club, but he's not a kid anymore, Asgard. I mean, he's an international player now. He's going into a squad and a team, with Norway and playing beside Haaland and Odegaard and people like that. And I have seen absolutely nothing from him in a Rangers jersey. I don't see him getting past people. I don't see him breaking lines with passes. I don't see him coming up with a killer pass. I don't see him shooting for distance. Don't see him breaking into the box and arriving late, trying to go in the end of thing. All the things you would want for a number 8 or a number 10. I've not seen any of that. All I ever see him doing is when he gets the ball, he'll almost feign to go forward and then he'll check back and play a simple pass either inside or backwards. And he's no impacting or influencing games.
Scott,
how much
of that is just, again, a bit like Ant-Man, a bit like Mikey Moore, that they're playing instruction, that this is what the coach is asking of them, that we don't want you taking risks, we want you keeping the ball, whereas for me, that's what your number 10, your number 10 is supposed to be there to be a risk taker and to try things. And this chatting, we've all seen his shooting record down at Wigan and at Luton, he's famed down there for all these 25, 30 yarders that he was scoring. Yep. He's barely done that this season. So, I mean, is it for me, is it maybe perhaps this is the time that you can see get the shackles off, and perhaps they've played to this such a structured, regimented game plan that perhaps if they can have a bit of freedom now that you can maybe see the best of him. I mean, I think that's what you have to be hoping, because otherwise, as you say, there's not an awful lot to go on to justify whatever it is they paid. Was it £3.5 million? I mean,
yep.
There's no that has to be the only hope that's left with Asgard.
He's very neat and tidy. He can kind of take the ball in tight areas, but beyond that, in terms of influencing game, what Rangers need is influencers in that final third.
Yeah.
Hadji was always kind of criticised for his lack of pace and whatnot, but I always felt Hadji influenced games.
Pass forward.
He could come up with a goal. He could come up with assists. Maybe not in his last few months there after the injuries and whatnot, but at his peak, that was the kind of player we were told Asgard would be. But he's been a massive disappointment. Joe Rothwell's been a massive disappointment. But again, we're told, by Leeds fans that we're using him wrong, that he was a kind of number 8 last season, the guy that would burst forward, whereas Russell Martin seemed to turn him into a number 6. So it's what I mean about, whoever comes in is going to need to work with this group of players, and he's going to need to work to their strengths rather than impart whatever philosophy he may have about football. That's going to be his first thing that he's going to need to do. He's going to need to get the best out of the squad he's got, and it's very hard to think, of MD, who's who's going to want to do that at this stage. It's just a difficult time of the season. In terms of who the new manager is, I just hope Kevin Thelwell doesn't have another boy sitting at home to be called on, because we're not. If we bring in someone who's wanting to do the same thing that Russell Martin wants to do, now they might be a better manager, they might be a better leader, they might be a better motivator, but ultimately, if the tactics are the same, possession for possession's sake, we're going to end up with the same result. It needs to be somebody who's willing to, maybe put their own ego to a side and get the best out of these players.
So who's the guy then, Douglas? Who do you want? Who do the punters want?
I mean, my own personal preference is Gerrard. I know Gerrard has got, had his faults as well. It's very easy to kind of gloss over the kind of first 2 seasons where we didn't win anything. But I think people forget, the state the club's in right now is pretty bad, but it was even worse when, Gerrard took over. We had finished third in the league. We had Graham Murray in charge for about 30 matches. Things weren't great. There was a big turnover. Celtic were a lot stronger back then than they are now as well. Brendan Rodgers was kind of at the peak of his powers, and I think Gerrard bought into it right away. To be Rangers manager, you've got to be a leader as well. It's not enough to just be a head coach. You've got to be a leader, and Gerrard was a leader. The Malmo result was a bit of black mark against his name, but I feel if he hadn't left when he did, I think Rangers would have went on to win the league that season. We probably wouldn't have got to the Europa League final, which meant I'd have been spared the most painful footballing moment of my life. So, sliding doors moments. Gerrard's mine. I think. Is it Marco Rose, the boy who was at Leipzig, was kind of linked? I think he's quite an intriguing prospect. Beyond that, someone like I can't imagine if Derek McInnes knocked Rangers back in 2017. I can't imagine he's very interested in the job right now. I know he's one that will be linked. My own personal feeling is I think we might be looking at some sort of interim manager, to be honest, to just get through the next few months. I don't know what you guys. I've heard you guys might know more than me.
Well, me and Scott, we've certainly discussed this. Listen, I think in terms of the punters, again, I wrote my piece today. I think the danger for the board right now is they go out and make another appointment the fans aren't on board with. And that's not to say they should be led by the fans, but whatever decision they make has to come with the backing, the support of the supporters, because otherwise you just very quickly end up in the situation you're in this now. As soon as you hit a bump in the road, the punters, they have zero patience to put up with any more disappointing results. So I think for me, in terms of I think the supporters will accept right now, I think you're doing a very narrow list. Certainly in terms of who's gettable, I think Gerrard would be high on it. I think, again, you're right. I think you need to be a figurehead to be Rangers manager. I think he proved that that's exactly what he was. He was somebody who insisted upon a certain level of standards. Okay, it took a while for him to get to a point where he was in a title-winning position. But again, I agree with you that the club was in such a mess. It was never going to be a scenario, as I said earlier, that you're going to knock out the park in 1 year. It had to be done gradually, and that might have to be the case again this time. But I think Gerrard would certainly be somebody who the fans would could get on board with. I think Derek McInnes, I think his time, I think his stock's on the rise again. And I think there are a lot of fans now who would just say, okay, just get a deal. We've ran through everybody else, just get a deal. I think folk are saying, well, if Tony Bloom and Jamestown Analytics think that he's good enough to take care of their project, and you look at everything they've done at Brighton and at Union St Gilloise, then maybe he's not a bad choice. And I think he would be a terrific fit right now for what Rangers need. Again, somebody to go in there and just set standards and not accept excuses that the club has been offering for the last, certainly the last few months, if not longer. And then you get, Sean Dyche, obviously his links with Kevin Thelwell down at Everton. I can see him make that call, whether or not financially it would be lucrative enough to him. I think he was on that Overlap podcast a few months back talking about he doesn't mind being that sort of guy that clubs in relegation trouble go to when they usually get to this point in the season and they sack their manager and look for somebody else to come in and dig them out of a hole. I remember him saying it pays very well. So whether or not Rangers are in a hole right now, they need somebody to dig them out, but whether or not they can match up with Premier League managers' wages that's another thing to be considered. So and then listen, there's obviously Kevin Muscat, but again, I'm not entirely convinced, as you say, this. He's got a philosophy of how football's played. I think Rangers now need a leader of men. I think they've tried the tactical route. They've tried somebody that's got ideals and philosophies. I think what they need is somebody to go in there and grab folk by the collar and kick a few backsides and look to get, basically just have players accepting responsibility in the pitch. I think that's basically the position Rangers find themselves in. Listen, in years to come and seasons to come, once they've got a bedrock of stability and foundations put in place, then the club can look to do that. But I think they've just this season they've went to do too much too soon. I think they had to build gradually. I don't think they've done that.
Scott, I'm going to ask you. It feels quite remarkable asking this, but is Derek McInnes a realistic candidate for Rangers, given what he's doing at Hearts, given he previously knocked Rangers back in similar situations when the club wasn't in a great place? I mean,
I think it is. I think it is 100%, Douglas. And Derek McInnes, for me, should be Rangers' number one target for the job. And ironically, it's a lot more difficult now for them to go and get him. They've had chances in the past to get him. I know you said he knocked it back that time, and he did, but I think circumstances were totally different. I think he knocked it back. I think he was almost warned against taking the job because of what he kind of seen once he'd kind of lifted the bonnet at the club. I don't think he felt it was kind of stable at that time. He had a brilliant job at Aberdeen, getting well looked after by Stewart Milne. I just think circumstances were different. For me, look, Hearts will know what to lose, Derek McInnes, obviously, and Rangers will have to pay a premium if they want to go and take him from Hearts. But I think they should do that, and if they do, Derek McInnes will obviously have a huge decision to make. And having knocked Rangers back once, personally, I'd be amazed if he knocked him back again. And that's him sitting with Hearts at the top of the league, with potential for a title challenge, with a club in really good shape, with Tony Bloom's backing, with a really strong squad. But I don't care what anybody says, for a guy like Derek McInnes, Rangers will still be a huge lure for him. And despite everything we've said about the hierarchy at the moment and the decisions that they're making, the club's in a stable position now financially, with Americans in, Andrew Kavanagh, Parag Marat, obviously the 49ers enterprises as well. So I don't think there's any kind of doubts about that now. It's just whether Derek McInnes is willing to leave Hearts and where they are just now to go and take on this mammoth challenge of making Rangers the best team in Scotland again. But I think he would relish that personally. And look, Hearts fans will not want to hear that. I'm sure Tony Bloom and the people at Hearts won't want to hear that. But no, it is what it is. For me, Derek McInnes is the best manager in Scotland out with Brendan Rodgers. So why shouldn't Rangers, when they're looking for a manager, go and try and get the best? I think they should have probably appointed him before now at some stage. And for where Rangers are just now, I totally agree with everything Andy says. They need a leader. They need a figurehead. They know a guy. They need a guy who knows Scottish football inside out, knows Rangers inside out, knows the demands, the expectation, the standards. This is a guy Walter Smith said, went on record as saying should be a Rangers manager at some point in his career. So for fans, that for me should be enough. If he thought he was good enough, then he's certainly capable of doing the job. I'd be amazed if Kevin Thelwell and Kavanagh and Patrick Stewart go down a foreign route or somebody who would be seen as a big gamble for where Rangers are. And I'd be amazed if they go down that route. But it's Rangers we're talking about, and sometimes the arrogance of these people, thinking that they know best. It should never surprise you. So I wouldn't rule out them going and get like a Marco Rose or a Danny Roll or something. I mean, it's just some of the guys that have been mentioned, but for me, that would be a bad move. Rangers need somebody who can go in there, no settling in period, no time to understand what's required at Rangers. And look, Derek McInnes ticks just about every box. I understand why I wouldn't be against Steven Gerrard for a lot of those reasons. I just always worry about somebody. The people say he should never go back. I know it's worked out not too bad for Brendan Rodgers at the minute, but I'd be slightly concerned about that.
Smith as well.
He's up. Well, Gerrard's no managed in a while, so that would be a worry.
He doesn't actually seem to show any inclination to want to return to management either.
That's the other thing.
There's also a sticking point. Gerrard himself was on record as saying that he's not a coach. So which coach would he bring in? There's an obvious candidate there which might not please, some Rangers fans, Scott.
No, you're right. So for all those reasons, I'm not 100% convinced about Gerrard. The others, I agree with, and I think Sean Dyche comes into the thinking purely because of the Thelwell connection, and also because we're sitting here saying Rangers probably need a more pragmatic manager, kind of no nonsense. Dyche ticks all of those boxes. He obviously doesn't know Rangers as well. He's never managed in Scottish football. I could see why fans maybe a wee bit sceptical. What's it going to be like to watch if it is that kind of more rudimentary approach to games. Look, there are pros and cons for a lot of them, but for me, McInnes just ticks every box. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy to go and get him, but if you want to go and get the best or the most suitable guy for the job, then I think you need to go and ask the question. I don't know how much it'll take to get him out of Hearts, but Rangers need to find that out and at least test the water. Look, a guy we've not mentioned is obviously Barry Ferguson, who was in the job at the end of last season. I mean, Douglas, you go to most of the games. You were there last season with Barry's tenure. I mean, he completely ruling Barry out. I mean, he was interviewed for the gig before Russell Martin get the job.
I don't particularly want Barry Ferguson to be Rangers manager. I think his managerial record is on par with Russell Martin's, to be honest. But I think during the Russell Martin era, I've honestly got to the stage where anyone would have been an improvement, and I think Barry Ferguson would be an improvement on Russell Martin because he is at least a leader. He's maybe not the greatest tactician. I still don't think he's going to be the permanent Rangers manager. I can see a scenario where Barry Ferguson is brought in again for a few months to steady the ship, so to speak.
Douglas,
whether Barry Ferguson wants to be that guy, I think is.
I'll stop you there. It's not going to happen. Right. If Barry Ferguson's coming back, it's to be Rangers' permanent manager. He's not going to accept coming back as another stopgap. I think we all know him. Obviously, he's our columnist. We all know him well enough. He's did his bit. He was overlooked. If they want him to come back, he has to come back as manager. Now, we can all argue the toss about whether or not his record, as you say, was good enough. He had 2 great results against Celtic last year. He had a tremendous result in Europe against Fenerbahce. Unlucky the way the first leg went against Athletic Bilbao, the sending off. Things might have, who knows if they kept 11 in the park that night, things might have been different with that. But listen, I think Barry would first admit the results elsewhere probably weren't consistently good enough. But then again, I think he was operating under difficult circumstances with a lot of guys, a lot of uncertainty over their future, a lot of injury issues, and just guys bang out of form, frankly. So, but listen, again, I think you're entirely right. would he be an upgrade right now what Russell Martin provided? Absolutely. He'd come in there, he would kick a few arses, he would basically tell some home truths and demand certain standards. Whether, again, as you say, that's good enough to get the club where they want to go long term, I'll let others judge that. But what I will say is that Barry Ferguson's not going back in as interim manager. Absolutely no chance.
I think as well with Sean Dyche, Sean Dyche has a worse win percentage than Russell Martin. Now I know statistics can skew things, but that's not a very inspiring appointment.
So again, I'm just putting that's in the Premier League where he's basically dealing. He's usually opposite a club that's got one of the lower budgets. I think if you go look at his
the Premier League though,
he's got Burnley promoted to the Premier League twice, and okay, you can go second time around. He had parachute payments and that skewed thing, but I think you're not trying to tell me that I won't accept that winning the English Championship is an easier task than winning a Scottish Premiership title. I think it's at the very least on par and should be taken with. He deserves all the credit he gets for that, frankly.
I think, to be honest, I think Rangers fans have had their fill of Championship level managers.
Very true, very true. Yeah, very true. Win a title right enough, but yeah.
Ironically, the biggest black mark against Derek McInnes among Rangers fans right now might be they don't want to derail Hearts' title challenge. Because they look the best bet to mount any threat to Celtic this season. So maybe it might be best to keep him in the hot seat for a wee bit longer, rather than upset the apple cart.
You might get Rangers back in a title challenge if they get them in quick enough. I know Andy's saying it's unlikely, and of course it's a massive task, but look, you never say never. And if they pick the right guy, if they get the right guy, he comes in, gets a tune out of these players right away, hits the ground running, it's no insurmountable because, as I've said earlier, Celtic aren't firing on all cylinders. There's opportunities. I think actually Barry Ferguson said in his column last week, probably quite rightly, that he's kind of struggling to remember a better opportunity than this season for a Rangers team to go and win a league, given the kind of standard of the opposition. So, well, it's going to be tough. 9 points, 11 points, whatever it is at the top. Don't know how Hearts are going to react. Obviously, will they kind of fade away? It looks unlikely, just given the strength of the squad and obviously the quality of their manager. But it'd be interesting if Rangers go and ask the question about McInnes. Because I was kind of laughing with Andy earlier on, but kind of half serious. I mean, people will say, "Oh, well, Hearts will not let them go. Why would they ever let them go?" But the whole point of Jamestown Analytics is that you go and get people, you bring them in. They do really well for you, and then they move on. They move on to bigger and better things, usually for money and for a profit. Now, I know that's normally with players, but it's the same with managers as well. So I'm not saying Hearts would be glad to let them go, but if there's a compensation figure already set and Rangers meet that, then Hearts would need to say, obviously McInnes would need to decide, but Hearts would need to say, right, well, look, you've done a good job for us. We get our cash, off you go, and we go to Jamestown and find out who the next guy is, hopefully to keep this title challenge going.
What I would say is, I think from a Hearts perspective, I think they're thinking this is the last thing they need. Everything's so rosy in the garden. I mean, you think back to when was it 2004-5 when George Burley is in, and then they have, again, more self-inflicted than this time, but they have a change of manager that absolutely derails everything. 11, 12 games into a season. They will not want any of this. They will want Rangers to go and pick a manager, any manager that's not Derek McInnes, and do it soon. Because what they don't want is Derek McInnes losing focus. Everything's going so well for them. They want him with his eye on the prize at Tynecastle. So, it will be interesting to even see how that plays out because, they'll back themselves. I mean, I think Scott's right. I mean, this is maybe Rangers' best chance of getting back in the title race if they can derail Hearts. With Celtic, so as we say, not looking like they're firing all cylinders. Maybe this is the only way to get back into the title race.
Can we just quickly? Do you think we can expect an appointment before the Dundee United match?
I think so. I think that's not the whole point, but I mean the purpose of doing it obviously during the international break is you've got that fortnight to get it sorted. And I've said before on here, a sporting director's job is to see round corners and to know what's coming next. Now, if Kevin Thelwell hasn't been watching what's been going on at Ibrox in the last few weeks with Russell Martin and the fans and results, and hasn't been thinking ahead to who the next guy is, then he's not doing his job properly. So you've got to imagine, surely, it's the way big clubs operate, they will have a fair idea right now on who the next guy is going to be, or at least have 2 or 3 in mind that they want to speak to. So no, I actually think I'm probably just saying this out of hope for me and Andy that it's not this dragged out saga that we had in the summer for weeks on end. But no, I think it will get done, Douglas, in the next week or so, and the new guy will be in place for that Dundee United game at Ibrox, where you would hope, as I say, if the fans are behind it, you would hope they have a sellout, they get behind the new guy, they get off to a great start, winning at home, and then somehow they can build a wee bit of momentum and put a wee run together.
I mean, they've got no excuses for it to take that length of time. Scott says they should have had a short list. I'm led to believe that there's a short list was requested by the board a couple of days ago. I think, over the summer, the takeover stuff and all that to be going on with in the background, and that is what we're told caused the delay. They need to have somebody in place for Dundee United. That's as simple as that. They need to have somebody in place. I would argue in the next couple of days, give them a week at least. I mean, you're going to have half the squad away in international duty anyway, but whoever comes in needs to be given a few days, a clear run, working with the squad before they go into Dundee United. I mean, I think they then get, after that Dundee United game, they're away to Bergen. Is that right, Scott? Is that the week? Yeah. So, I mean, you're then back into these 2 games a week run, and obviously Russell Martin found that schedule difficult, and just in terms of getting his ideas across, they need to give whoever is coming in as much time as possible with the players.
I think we'll wrap it up there then. I'll let you 2 go and prep yourself for another managerial merry-go-round. Obviously, you can get this episode in all the usual places on the YouTube channel. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, leave a comment. I'm just need to go now because I heard my bus has been trapped in by a bunch of who are paying for my head. So thanks very much for listening. Catch you again soon.